I'll just eat through it a little bit. So another thing with these sheets, so what I'm going to do is have you guys initial next to each thing that we go over. At the end, I'm going to have you sign on the back, and then I'm going to wait to sign it until I see you guys working on the floor so I can do these competencies with you. So we're just kind of talking through them, but it'll make it so much easier when I'm on the floor with you and I can just watch you and then we'll get through it. So, okay, so catheter care. Catheter care is done by aides and nurses. So this is cleaning around their catheter. You're going to apply your gloves and use warm water and a soapy washcloth. Separate if you're doing a female, you're going to separate the inner labia and wash it down. You're going to always wipe front to back. You don't want to wipe bacteria into the urethra because then they could get a caudy or a urinary infection that we don't want. So always wipe front to back. Continue to wash the rest of the perineal area and wipe down. Make sure you're getting even in between their thighs and stuff because moisture can build up so much down there. And what we don't want is to get them a urinary infection with all that bacteria growing. You're going to rinse it well and then dry everything down. If indwelling urinary catheter is present, hold the catheter tubing while you're doing it so that you don't pull it. A lot of the times they'll have like that leg secure for their tubing, but make sure you're still holding it next to the urethra so it doesn't pull it off because you don't want that balloon in there to be pressing on them. You're going to wash everything down. So you're going to hold the tubing and wash it with soapy water because that tubing doesn't always stay right in the same spot. So you want the tubing to be really clean as well. So you're also going to wipe the tubing down with a soapy washcloth and water and rinse it with water so the soap doesn't stay on there. And then dry it off. So generally what they say is clean the tube 3 inches from the urethra. So you're going to do like a span of that much. It doesn't matter. Always do more than you think. It's easy to do. So if you see any pain, redness, the resident is complaining about the catheter really hurting, please let the nurse know. Again, we don't want the urine to be contaminated and to have a UTI, but it's easy for us to see when they have an indwelling catheter because we can look at their catheter bag in the urine and see what it looks like. So, and then always position them in the most comfortable position. You can remove your gloves and wash your hands. Any questions about catheter care?
We only have one person.
Yeah. Yep. We used to have 2. I'm trying to think of who it was. I'm eating on my video here. Okay. The second competency I put behind it that I just wanted to skim through is emptying the bag. So we only do have one on Promise right now. He empties his own bag. But in the case that, you know, somebody gets one and can't empty it, like if Jeanette Burdine keeps going downhill in hospice and they do a catheter, we'll need to know how to empty the bag. So you're going to always want your supplies. You're going to have that measuring container, the plastic white ones, alcohol wipes, and then your PPE. So you're going to wear your gown, gloves, mask, everything that you're going to want in case of droplet. You don't want to get any urine on you. So I would. You don't have to. It's called extended base precaution, so you can do what you want. The only time it's absolutely required is if the urine is contaminated with something. So if there's E. coli, ESBL, MRSA, anything like that, you will have to. So place the clean equipment at the bedside or the overbed table. I would place it on the ground because nobody wants that on the overbed table. If you're bending to the ground to do it anyway, wash your hands, put on your gloves, wipe the Foley catheter or drainage tubing junction with the alcohol wipe. So wherever you're going to flip down to drain it out of, make sure you're using an alcohol wipe for that. The reason it sounds ridiculous, but the reason for that is you don't want bacteria crawling back up in that bag. So you want to make sure it's sterile. Disconnect the catheter from the tubing. Oh, this is cleaning the actual bag. I'm talking about draining it. Hold on, I'm just reading through this quick. So they have you doing this differently than we do here. When you're going to empty the drainage bag, what you'll do is you will flip down the junction that's going to drain out of. You're going to measure it with an clean it with an alcohol swab and then measure it in your measuring your white tub. You're going to put the junction back up and take it to the toilet, and you're going to do your eyes and nose to make sure you know how much is coming out, and then drain it and wash it down there again. When changing the leg bags, I will print off our policy for us, but it has gone back and forth between whether we use vinegar or bleach. This is just an evidence-based practice thing. We use vinegar right now. That's why we have vinegar on the unit. So you're going to clean the bag every day with 1 to 10 vinegar water. So you'll do 30 ounces of vinegar to whatever 10 of that is. I'll have to do the math. Do you guys do this on the unit? Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is I'm just going to skip over this because this is the competency that I'm going to want to see in person. We are supposed to clean the catheter bag nightly and then let him hang. This is for Larry. He empties his own catheter bag, and so I think people often forget about it. So I am going to just do those competencies in person. But does everybody feel comfortable doing catheter care and being around Larry's catheter?
Never been around it.
Okay.
Mom always wants to be in.
And he does it a lot on his own. Make sure if you're ever around him, what you need to be doing, is he A-hull or B-hull? A. Yep. You want to give him the supplies to do the catheter care. So he's pretty modest, but make sure you're at least giving him a soapy washcloth, a wet washcloth with no soap on it, and then a dry one so he can clean off his catheter. Okay, post-mortem care. So this is when somebody passes, what we do for their care before the funeral home gets here. So you're going to ensure the deceased room is empty. There's some family that has requested to be there while you're cleaning them up. I would highly advise against this, but you cannot make them leave. So if they want to stay there, they can stay. But you're really just going to be washing up their bodies so that they look presentable for the funeral home. You're going to apply gloves and do standard precautions. The body can be infectious even after death. So if they had C. diff when they were alive, they have C. diff now. The infection's still there. Gently pull the eyelashes down to make sure the resident eyes are closed. Remove all tubes. So say, this is just hypothetical, if one of the bird boys died when they were here, which they had trachs, the staff nurse on staff would take their trach out so that we could wash around them and make them look as normal as possible. Insert the resident's dentures if available, or send them to the funeral home with the body. Bathe the resident from head to toe to make sure they look appropriate. Replace all dressings with clean dressings. So if they had a dressing on their butt from a coccyx wound, you're going to replace that so it looks nice and clean. Place a clean pad under the resident's buttocks in case any excess fluid comes out. That's not uncommon. Cover the resident and position them for family viewing, and then you can remove your gloves and leave the room. Make sure, the whole point of this is to make sure they look presentable. The family is very distraught when this happens, especially if it's not expected. If you cannot stomach this, it is not uncommon. It is just fine, but we need to make sure that somebody is doing this task. So if you feel like you're going into the room and you can't do it up to standards of what the family or what you would like to see if your family member died, please get somebody else, because just halfway doing it and making sure the resident looks halfway presentable isn't going to work. They need to look really good. So if you cannot stomach this, make sure you're swapping duties with somebody else so somebody else can do it. Anything else on that? Any questions? Mechanical lifts, we talked about this, so I'm going to skim through it, but make sure you're always using 2 people, whether it be a stand-aid or a Hoyer lift. You're always going to have one person running the lift and one person guiding the resident's body. What else do I want you to know on this? So this is our guidelines just kind of teach you how to know if they need a mechanical lift. Our therapy department has already figured that out for you. Do not try to transfer somebody who is supposed to have a lift without a lift, because it will not end well. For example, if Becky Akers tells you, I don't want to use my stand-aid today, we can do it, just me and you, let's do it. Don't do that. You have to use a stand-aid. If she's that upset about it, you can come to nurse management or therapy. I would go to therapy too. But make sure you're always using what is on their care plan. Yeah, I think the biggest part about this was using 2 people. Make sure the straps on the slings are where they're supposed to be. When you use a Hoyer, how do you put the straps under their legs? crisscross. They're always crisscross. You don't want their legs to fly outward and them to fly under. And then the hooks, make sure your hooks are always on even and where they're supposed to be. So you don't want to be on a green loop if hawk is on the other end on a black loop. You want them even. You don't want them shifting around at all. In the event, because this did happen recently, that somebody is in a Hoyer swing and either having a behavior, not having a behavior, maybe having a seizure, or just flailing around, what would you do? Great. Always lower them either to the ground, if they were on the ground, to the bed, wherever you can. But those Hoyers are not designed for somebody to be like thrashing around when you're in them. So if somebody is having behavior and bouncing up and down to try to get the Hoyer to flip, it will flip. Make sure you get them down, get them in the lowest position, and then figure out from there what needs to be done. What do you do after you use a Hoyer? Always wipe it down. We have those lunch bags. They are lunch bags, hooked to the Hoyers with the purple wipes in them. They were the best thing to use because they're cleanable and they fit the purple wipes right in them. After every single use, you're going to want to use those. The state's going to watch that, so make sure you're using them. I don't think this competency has anything on it that we don't have. Make sure you always have a clear, unobstructed path when you're using your lifting machine. Ensure there's enough room to pivot. I know some of these rooms are small. I think of Dorothy Christensen. And her room, it can be small with that stand aid in it. So make sure that she's most likely going to get one of these bigger rooms, but that at least her path is unobstructed and that you have two people in there to maneuver it around because it can get very small. So if you have any questions about that, just let us know. Repositioning in bed. So we have a few people with repositioning programs. We are coming up with a new idea of this, of having a repositioning clock. I don't know if you guys have ever seen one of those. I have not. But one of the nurse managers has, and so we're going to start using it. And what it is it's a sheet that goes above their bed and has a clock. And at every hand, every 2 hours, it says what side they're supposed to be on. That way, if you walk in at noon and you're not normally in that room, you know, okay, Sandra's supposed to be on her left side right now. The biggest thing with repositioning is do it with two people if the resident is too heavy, and do not just start tearing the pad out from underneath them because it will cause friction, it will cause a tear, it will cause coccyx wounds. So make sure you're doing it correctly with two people, lifting them up, maneuvering them around, and repositioning every 2 hours as needed. Any challenging situations that we have on the floor with repositioning? Okay, make sure when you're repositioning that you are lowering the head of the bed so that you're not trying to reposition them where they're sitting up because that's not going to work. Yeah, make sure you don't cause any friction with skin, and make sure that if they are on a repositioning program that you're documenting that in their tasks. And unfortunately, I know it's very hard on both ends, but we can see when you guys are documenting all repositionings at the same time. So if somebody was supposed to be repositioned every 2 hours and you do it like at noon and just do all of them, we can see that. I'm going to be honest with you. I see you guys repositioning, so I trust it. But if state walks in, they're going to balk a little bit, but it is what it is. Not everybody has time to chart every 2 hours. Just if you can find the time, please go in there and chart it every 2 hours. Also, if it's a resident that's repositioning independently on their own, say Mavis or Darlene or anybody that like that has dementia that's just pedaling around all day in their wheelchairs, remind them to, just reposition. They can offload in their chair either one way or another, and just tell them maybe try to sit on your right side a little bit or try to sit on your left side a little bit. That way that they are maneuvering around. All right. PPE use and gloves I wear. Okay. So this is something that we have nailed into everybody's head because of COVID and everything else. But PPE use got a little bit easier in the fact that if you have somebody with a highly infectious disease, you don't have to do the whole shebang because you already have half of it on. In our building, we wear masks and goggles 24/7 during resident care. We can get rid of the goggles once the once the community spread is no longer substantial. So when we go to moderate or slim community spread of COVID, which should be happening shortly, we can get rid of the goggles. That's a CDC guidance. That's a South Dakota Department of Health guidance. Face masks is a little bit hazier because we don't have any guidance on that yet. That's just been an ongoing thing. So we kind of have to wait for future guidance to see if we're ever getting rid of face masks and when we can do that. But goggles will hopefully be getting rid of shortly. With your face masks, make sure that you're wearing that at all times. If you are at lunch break, make sure you have a clean paper towel. You're going to take your face mask off and lay it face up. So you want the clean part up so that it doesn't get soiled. If your face mask ever gets soiled, please toss it and get a new one. We have a million of them. What we're doing with these face masks is called long-term use. Because generally after you would go into an infectious resident's room, you would take it off right away and grab a new face mask as needed. That was prior to COVID when we didn't have to wear them all the time. But just make sure you're wearing these, that you make sure they're clean. If they're soiled at any time, you don't keep reusing them. This is going to tell you all kinds of times on when you should be wearing a face mask. We're not going to go over that because we wear them all the time. Your gloves. So the objective of gloves is to prevent any infection or contamination to you and the resident. I know people don't always think this way, but you have to think worst case scenario. So say somebody was in here and you were doing a blood sugar and you didn't have gloves on, and we found out the next day that they have hepatitis C. I mean, it's happened before in here, so you always have to think worst case scenario. And even if you don't want to put gloves on, put them on anyway. And then you have those people that don't even wear them when they're changing briefs. So just always wear gloves. Even if you don't know if you should or not, wear gloves. Gloves are always single-use gloves. They are never multi-use, always single-use. Meaning if you're going into a resident's room and you are doing pericare and then you want to do their hair or denture care or cleaning or anything like that, toss gloves after every single use, after every single task. I don't care if it's the same resident. We need to make sure those gloves aren't spreading stuff even on the same resident. So always single-use gloves. You're going to always use hand sanitizer or wash your hands after using gloves when you take them off. You're going to use gloves when there's secretions or bodily fluids, any cuts, scrapes, or wounds, any spills or splashes, any potentially contaminated items, or whenever in doubt. So this is pretty much telling you always wear them, no matter what you're doing. So you're going to get the gloves out of the box, or this says open the package. This is telling you how to put sterile gloves on. We don't need that. We just use normal gloves. Nurses will use sterile gloves. We'll go over that. So always wear your gloves. Gowns. So gowns are made to protect you against bodily fluids. They are disposable. Dispose after every use. And does everybody know what does a PPE? So if you are on isolation and you're taking your PPE off and you're putting in the trash can, what does the trash can have to look like? They always have to have a red bag, but the trash can should have something on it. It has a hazard warning, and it always has to have a lid. It can never be open. The lid always has to be down because we don't want somebody walking by there. God forbid Darlene walk by there and just stick her hand in there. So it should always have a lid. Best case scenario, it should always be in the resident room. It shouldn't be outside the door. We want it in the resident room next to the exit so that you can doff your PPE and walk right out of the room. So your gowns, you're going to, what does this go through? Let's go through the objectives. They're not reusable. If we ever have reusable gowns, we'll let you know, but we do not. Always put the gown on before touching the resident. So you're going to obtain the gown. Yeah, this is pretty self-explanatory. Make sure you're always tying it, whether it be tie or Velcro. Every tie needs to be tied on that gown. That way it doesn't flap over. And then when taking it off, you're still going to have your gloves on when you take off your gown. You're going to rip it and then you're going to fold it in. So you don't ever want to touch your clothing with your contaminated gloves. You want to touch the gown and just kind of peel it off and roll it up. And we'll do a whole competency on that. But make sure you're wearing gowns. Even if you're in doubt, for example, we have somebody here who has a wound vac, who has a pretty bad wound. Even if it does not say it on the door, I would wear a gown. That's just me, but always feel like you can wear whatever you want if you need to be safe. You don't have to not wear it just because the sign doesn't say so. I wear, again, I'm just going to skim through this because we wear it all the time. We'll let you know as soon as you don't have to wear them. Those of you, if we ever have a COVID unit here again, we'll have to wear the shield on here, but thank God we have the goggles now. I hated those shields. Those are bad. All right, anything on PPE? All right, so prevention of pressure injuries. This kind of goes with the repositioning, but we'll talk about risk assessment. So nursing does risk assessments for residents weekly when they come in on Dakota Drive from the hospital, or we do it quarterly for Promise. We just assess the risk. That doesn't mean we're looking at their skin quarterly. We still look at their skin weekly, but just the nurse assessing the risk. So prevention from getting a pressure injury can be, good nutrition. You always want them to eat. You don't want people that are in hospice not eating well often develop them because they don't have much nutrition. You want to keep the skin clean and dry. Any moisture, even in the crevices from sweat, can cause pressure injuries. Mobility and repositioning is a huge thing. You always want people to be mobile because then it will stop them from getting pressure injuries. And then supportive surfaces. So any pressure relieving, every mattress that we have in this facility is pressure relieving, every single one. It's just a matter of what it's pressure relieving up to. So if nobody has a pressure injury, we have up to stage 2 pressure relieving mattresses on their bed. If they have a stage 3 pressure injury, we up that mattress. So their mattress is always tailored to whatever their needs are. And that's the same thing with why I was talking about their cushion in their wheelchair. Make sure, because they spend so much time in their wheelchairs, make sure all of them have cushions in their wheelchair. We'll go over staging a bit later. TED hose. Okay. So what is the meaning of TED hose? Can you guys tell me? What do we use TED hose for? Swelling of the feet and legs, and then we size them for him, so it's not one size fit all. Tell us. Yeah, we have a ton of them. We have so many of them, so we can get them at any time. So just let us know. Or like we even did an audit not that long ago to make sure everyone had them in her room, and Velma was supposed to be getting them every day, and she didn't have any in there, so she wasn't getting them. So just let us know. We can get them out. So they're used for swelling. If people are building fluid in their legs, they're also used for blood flow, to help with the blood flow. Below the knee TED hose should do exactly that. Go right below their knee, down to their toes. You have thigh-high TED hose. We don't use those a whole lot here, but those go about mid-thigh and all the way down to their toes. They use those in the hospital a lot. So this is going to tell you how to measure for TED hose. We're just going to talk about how you put them on. So you're always going to have the supplies with you. If the resident has been ambulating, instruct him or her to lie down in bed with their feet elevated for 15 to 30 minutes. What this is going to do, and why we put them on right away when they're in bed in the morning, is because their legs are as small as they're going to get all day. If your legs are raised up, they're going to shrink, and then the more they're sitting in their wheelchair, they're going to kind of build up that fluid. So if somebody has been walking around and they haven't gotten their TED hose yet, like let's say Deb Sullivan, she's going to have to lay in her bed for a good 30 minutes before we can stick those TED hose on her. Let's see. You're going to wash and dry the legs and apply the stockings with one hand on the inside of the stocking holding the ankle. We'll do an in-person competency about this. Does everybody feel comfortable putting TED hose on? Okay. Make sure that at no point it's cutting off circulation at the top of their leg. If it is, those are not the right size. We need to get them the right size. There was a time when Marianne Sudenga kept falling, and it was because she had bought her own Ted hose that were too small, and they were cutting off circulation to her legs, so she couldn't feel her legs. So make sure that they're serving the purpose that need be. And when you're putting the Ted hose on, if you see any skin abnormalities that weren't normally there, please let us know. Deb Sullivan has a new mark on her heel that I'm sure people saw with Ted hose, and for some reason we didn't catch it. So just make sure you're looking at the legs as you're putting them on. When you have Ted hose on, you don't want any wrinkles in them. You want them to be as smooth as possible so that those wrinkles don't cause any sort of skin injury. Make sure you have your gloves on when you're putting Ted hose on, because a lot of our people have shedding skin, and that you're washing your hands, removing your gloves and washing your hands afterwards. Any questions on those? All right. Care plans. Does everybody know where the care plans are? The care plan books on, so we have 2 care plans here. We have our care plan books on Promise Lane. Those are up on the shelf. Those are full care plans. Those will tell you everything you need to know about the resident. And then we have our pocket flow sheets. Make sure if state is here, you do not call them care plans, but our pocket flow sheets, which tell you their transfer status and just a few things about them. Anything new, for example, I'm just going to throw this out there that you're questioning, like Anna Hunsinger just got diagnosed with cancer, and she's going to be doing chemo and radiation. Anything new like that will be on their care plan. So go ahead, feel free to go in there and read it. Some of it is just really mundane stuff of fall interventions. You guys know the residents better than anybody in the building because you're with them more. So if there's anything that you're questioning, are we doing this for them? Go look at their care plan and see, because if we aren't, we want to know that so that we can add that intervention in there. Care plans on Dakota. You guys know where those are? On the shelf in the care plan book. And then also the same for Rushmore. They're on the shelves. It says right on them, care plans. I think on Promise they're in 2 different books because we don't have enough room. The pocket care plan is on Promise Lane. They're hooked to the cork boards, and what it is it goes by hall. So if you have a hall, it'll say their name, their room, their diet, how they transfer, and then any special needs that they have. And I just revamped them, so I'll put new ones out there today. So they'll be pinned to the cork board on Promise. Dakota, we don't do those as much because we have our nursing report sheets that have information on there, and then anything that's on the care plan that would be on the pocket care plan for Dakota is actually on the back of their door. Okay. On that whiteboard. Same with the policy procedure manual. So all Bethany policies have a book on those shelves, and then our emergency preparedness manual. So you'll have to pull these books out so you can see which ones are the policy procedures and which ones are which. It'll say care plan, policy procedure. Our emergency preparedness book is going to be your best resource if you ever don't know what you're doing. It's red, it's bright red. The first sheet in there has a call tree. So what it says is call Deb Hairbolt. If Deb Hairbolt doesn't answer, call Hunter Winklepleck. And you'll literally go down this tree until somebody answers their phone and you say, hey, the building's flooding, the building's on fire, we have an elopement, whatever it may be. You'll go and you'll call them. Then once you get a hold of somebody, they're going to tell you, or you're just going to do it next. You'll flip to that page in the emergency book. So flip to flooding, and it'll tell you exactly what to do. Okay, remove the resident where the flooding is. Do this next. Do this next. It'll even have like call the fire department, call the electrical. It'll tell you everything to do. So that book, along with the policy book and the care plan book, is all on those shelves. Okay, the next thing we're going to go over is really important because people have not been doing it correctly. So DOH reporting, and I don't mean just like with falls with injury, DOH reporting in general. So I'll go over this policy, and I'm actually going to read the whole thing, and then we're going to review a few things. So our critical event reporting, to ensure the reporting of certain events of the DOH is done within 24 hours time. So the following will be reported to DOH in 24 hours. Any death resulting from a natural cause originating from the facility, such as accidents, abuse, or suicide. So this is any death, whether it be somebody that died from CHF or from abuse and neglect. You're going to report that. Any missing resident, so any elopement. If Darlene got out of the building and went to the church, we have to report that within 24 hours. Do you need me?
Funeral, you want USF, their hospice,
No.
anytime